Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. It's great to be here this cold, cold evening. I'm so thrilled to introduce Omar Saker here, all the way from Australia, where it's not as cold. So I'll just let you know, Omar is the acclaimed author of 3 poetry collections, including The Lost Arabs and Non-Essential Work. The Lost Arabs was shortlisted in 5 significant awards and won the 2020 Prime Minister's Literary Award for Poetry. He was the first Arab-Australian poet to receive this major prize. Omar is a widely published essayist and editor whose work has been translated into Arabic and Spanish. Son of Sin is his debut novel. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about my experience with this incredible novel, and then Omar is going to read from it, and afterwards he will be signing books, I believe, in that corner. So I think when writing or when any kind of art moves me, I find it quite difficult to speak about. It's sort of that place where language fails for me. So I was thinking about how to introduce Son of Sin, and I tried to just reduce my feelings about it to a single word or image and then go from there. And that word I came to was gravity. And I thought, this novel has its own center of gravity. And then I thought, okay, what does that mean? So I think for me it means that this is a work that operates on a dialectical level with an understanding of the body and the flesh as something that contains the world as it is contained by the world. So to borrow from Ricoeur, the body becomes this mediating space between the intimacy of the self and the externality of the world. And in its intimate, often uncomfortably intimate, narrative voice, this novel situates us in Jamal's body, and his body becomes our center of gravity, the space across which feeling, desire, shame, fear, love, pleasure, pain is mediated. But his body also becomes a space across which history is mediated. And those of us who are immigrants or children of immigrants, those of us who are displaced, descended from those who are displaced, those who have experienced the violence of imperialism, colonialism, racism, and who are alienated from part or all of our history, understand intimately the way that history simultaneously moves us and moves within us. In Jamal, the tension and contradiction that comes with occupying the middle space between belief and doubt, between self and others, and more concretely as a mixed-race character of Lebanese and Turkish descent, and as a queer Muslim coming of age in an environment that is often hostile towards him, is brought vividly and painfully to life. Son of Sin doesn't offer us false hope or placation, but it offers us the image of a scar on Hala, Jamal's mother's foot, a scar he inflicted accidentally by spilling boiling hot coffee on her. In the end, this terrible burn has healed, leaving an uneven darkness across the arch, a deep sunburst. Hala has hurt Jamal irreparably and in ways that will always mark him. In turn, he has hurt her. But there it is, written on her body for all to see, a burn, healing, and turning into something beautiful. So we will now hear Omar read.
Wow. Thank you so much. I wish I had gotten you to let me read that beforehand, because I'd have been like, that's too nice. Anything I read now is not going to live up to that. Thank you so much. That was really lovely. And thank you to Lighthouse for accommodating us really late in the game. Shout out to them. Thank you so much. I'm going to read a scene set in Turkey between Jamal and Qasim. They're on a beach. They made sand angels on the burning beach. Waves entreated Jamal and Qasim to leave the hot grains behind, but they stayed there, half buried and laughing because under the sand they could hold hands. The idea was to bake for as long as they could stand it, and then run into the water. Under the cry of gulls and the fuss of waves, the yells of children and chatter of friends, they talked. Jamal told him that he'd dropped out of his degree, that he'd been working in the years since and had no plans to go back. It felt so good to tell someone, to finally stop pretending. His family thought he'd completed his degree and that he was busy fulfilling his potential. He had never found a way to explain how much he hated his studies, how poorly prepared he was for the work, how poor he was, period, compared to his peers from the inner west and North Shore. He couldn't explain that he'd never looked down on his family or his own circumstances while he was still home with them, having had nothing to compare it to, and that even the flimsy illusion of middle-class living provided by sharehouses in the city had ruined him. He told Qasim that after one lecture in power and politics, he found a camera left behind by one of the tutors, and that the last photo on it was of the entire humanities staff shirtless, the women in bras and undies, the men in ties, forming a human pyramid, replicating Abu Ghraib, the torture of Iraqis at the hands of Americans, which had resurfaced in the news. And they were smiling like the soldiers. Here, he knew, was power. He showed Adam, the only other boy from Liverpool who went to his uni. And Adam showed his new film student mates who decided they had to do their own version to show the teachers that they were just as cool as them and not like boring or whatever. He'd never forget the queasy expression on Adam's face, his nervous laughter, the way he couldn't look Jamal in the eye. He took his place at the base of the pyramid, and Jamal held a leash attached to his pale body, looking directly at the camera and trying to smile because he didn't want to be boring or whatever. Didn't want to lose his new queer friends when he had only just met them. His shame grew and grew with each passing week until he quit the subject and then the degree. Hearing this, Qasim looked sad. They say the West is fucked up, and I guess I believed it, but he shook his head, blew out a breath. That you hated yourself, I get. We all taught this. It comes out in different ways. But did anyone else drop out? Was anyone hurt? No, Jamal said quietly. It would have been too improbable, too silly to say that he had hurt himself. What kind of sense did that make? And yet it was true. In his mind, he stood apart from his white friends. They had not suffered as he suffered, but that day he and they were the same, pantomiming his people's oppression. And there was the wound, that he could no longer say he had a people. His heart was beating so hard and he was drenched in sweat. He wanted to burst out of the sandy oven and run into the sea already. I'm not allowed to have a pet, Qasim said, because Baba has allergies. But with all the neighborhood cats, I never really needed one. I used to feed them whenever I could. One cat, he was this tiny orange thing, but a real tiger. And he wouldn't let anyone pat him except me. I don't know why, but I think just for that alone, I loved him. And you're telling me this because I don't want to think about that depressing shit you just dumped on this beach, Qasim said. Because cats are great. Because fuck you. Did you kill the cat? Astaghfirullah, Qasim said. What's wrong with you? You did, didn't you? I can tell. You can't just leave me hanging here feeling like a bag of shit. You've got to give a bad story for a bad story. That's how it works. Qasim was laughing in earnest now. Who told you that? And then, more seriously, you said it yourself. None of us are angels, so what does punishing yourself achieve? He paused. Do you believe in God? Mostly, Jamal said. You think if you punish yourself that he won't? I don't know, he lied. I was 12 when my aunties told me that being gay was haram. I couldn't understand it, or even the idea of hell. How could the most compassionate, the most merciful, have less compassion and less mercy than me? How could he hurt me for being as I was made to be, or anyone? I brought you into this world and I can take you out, Qasim murmured. Exactly, Jamal said. They all talk like that, like they own you. So you stopped believing? No. I cried myself to sleep a lot. Qasim grinned. Me too. I was the angstiest kid alive. I'd walk around these alleys yelling and arguing with God every week until I realized that arguing meant I knew He was listening, that this was all in my head and my heart. And Jamal didn't know what to say to that. He stared at this grinning golden boy, his delicate shoulders, the sheen on his skin, his damp chest hairs, and tried to compare it to the sad, tired, angry guy he'd seen days ago. He wanted very much to kiss the dip in his neck. What are you looking at? Qasim said, squinting at him. Nothing, Jamal said. But I know why the cat chose you. And Qasim groaned loudly, then exploded out of the sand, running at the rushing waves. Jamal laughed and ran after him, the shock of the cold so intense it flooded his whole body, the relief its own kind of ecstasy. He dived into the blue, tackling him, and they splashed around, sometimes wrestling, sometimes floating away, ducking under the waves. Qasim came up close to him after one dive, spitting out water. He looked like a drowned rat with his hair all flat, fringe stuck to his forehead. When did you know? He said. I'm still not sure that I do, Jamal said. I mean, it's like this, the waves. It never stays, if that makes sense. Not really, Qasim said. We're in it. Like everyone, Jamal said, nodding at the others around him, kicking his feet to stay afloat. I just don't feel like any of the words actually fit me. I knew when I was 6, Qasim said. I kissed my friend Hussein on the cheek and his mother slapped me. He laughed. I'm glad in retrospect. I never had to make a choice. Everyone just knew from then on. And no one says anything, Jamal said, eyes wide. And Qasim shrugged. Not to my face, he said, and went under. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I could have kept listening. So, as I said, the book, you can grab it right at the back, the table there, and Omar will be in the corner signing for the next 10 minutes. So please come say hi. Thanks so much.